Verse 10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then it says, here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
Okay. All right, keep that in mind. We'll get to verse 12. We talked about here's the patient and the patient of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God in the faith of Jesus Christ. And we'll talk about the patient and the faith, and we'll talk about verse 10. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at, I'm sorry, I'm looking at, we're in verse 13, right?
Yes, chapter 13.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, okay. Yes, verse 10, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And we're going to be getting down to there, but just keep in mind the Word of God as it has always been, and as it will always be. We had a reference to the two witnesses. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
If any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devours their enemy. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. Now this is getting back into part of the discussion that we've been having here, not really heated, but interesting discussion that we've been having here in regards to the position of the saints in regards to defense, in regards to their own personal defense and the defense of the gospel. And we're going to be talking about this a little bit more in regards to how it relates to us. We see that the two witnesses here are able to use the Word of God to destroy their enemies. They use the Word of God. They have to use the Word of God to destroy their enemies. And anybody that raises a hand against the two witnesses as a threat to them, as a serious threat to them, while they are giving their testimony, has to be destroyed. And they are destroyed through the Word of God at the hands of the two witnesses. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's what it says in the 11th chapter of the book of Revelation, and the 5th verse. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devours their enemy. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. Now the fire that comes out of their mouth is what?
It's the Word of God.
It's the Word of God. These witnesses are going to have the power. These witnesses are going to have the power and the authority to execute wrath, even up unto death, against the enemies of the church. Against it's tit for tat. I mean, the enemy is destroying the church, and the church has to make a stand. Else, no flesh would be saved. But the church has to make a stand. And the church makes its stand through the all-powerful word of God. And we find that being used by David. We find the word of God being used by David against his enemies. In the book of Psalms, we find the word of God being used by other men of God down through the ages in defense of themselves and in defense of the gospel. We know that Elijah, in order to defend the gospel, had to do what? What did Elijah have to do in order to defend the gospel? Pardon?
Qualify them.
On who?
And those who were sent to get him.
Huh?
And those who were sent to get him.
And what else did he do in order to defend the gospel and himself? What did he do with 150 prophets?
He killed them.
Huh?
He killed them.
Did he? The man of God?
Yes, he killed them.
What did he kill them with? Huh? What did he kill them with?
I don't know. Sword.
The sword. Huh? So we find that the gospel has to be defended. The gospel has to be defended. If the gospel is not defended, then what?
You have no
The
way.
church is only as strong as the defense for the gospel is. If there is no defense for the gospel, then there is no church. This is what is going on now. Don't you get the picture? Nobody's defending the gospel. Therefore, there's nothing in the church's business. There's no truth in the church because nobody defends the gospel no more. The enemy is destroying it, and nobody will stand up. See? Nobody will stand up. We're going to get into more of this. It's just to get you thinking right. Yes, Elijah destroyed all of the prophets because they were contrary, argumentative, and against the word of God. And God gave him the strength to take the sword and destroy all of them. Whose prophets were these? Whose prophets were these?
The king's prophet.
Who did they? Who was king? Who was the real king at this time? Huh?
Satan.
Who was the real king? Who was king at this time in Elijah's life? What was the name of the king? Y'all not thinking this morning. You need to know this. If you're ready for revelation, you need to know these things. Ahab was king. Now, who was the real king? Who was the real king? I'm surprised.
The real king.
If Ahab was king, who was the real king?
Well, the real king probably will have to be Jesus.
That's the righteous side.
So on the righteous side would be Lucifer,
Working through who?
His prophets.
walking this prophet, yeah.
The prophets are dead.
Working through his angels to
His little old wife, whose name was Jezebel, she was the boss.
yes, I'm thinking, I'm sitting here,
She was the real king.
me and Brother
Huh?
Paul both sitting back here.
She's the